All right, let's dive right in. For this explainer, I really want you to just picture this. We're standing way up in the high, cloud-shrouded spires of a place called the Silver Peak, and we're looking at this ancient wizard, Alaric. Now, Alaric has spent lifetimes, literally lifetimes, cataloging not, the raw elements of magic, but the secret levers of the human mind, the unseen impulses that move everyone from kings to beggars. So today, we're exploring this deeply grim, dark, and honestly mythic parable of power. We're going to look at the world right through Alaric's eyes and uncover some incredibly psychological strategies about indirect resolution and perception.
And, well, to really get that, we have to talk about his greatest creation, this magical artifact known as the Obsidian Mirror. Now, here's the catch. This mirror didn't reflect your face. Not at all. Instead, it reflected the tangled web of shadows that human beings cast on one another. So looking through this glass, Alaric didn't see the world as some peaceful little garden. No, he saw it as a chessboard. He was entirely focused on what he called the ideology of the unseen, and the lessons he pulled from this mirror, they form this fascinating architecture of perception that is, honestly, just as relevant in our modern offices as it was in his mythic world.
Okay, so let's move right into our first reflection, the King's Shadow. So this begins with a story about Alaric's very first apprentice. This kid was incredibly eager and brilliant, too. One day, he actually performs a spell of such raw, blinding fire that the elder wizards literally gasped in awe. It was that impressive. And Alaric is just standing there, watching as this boy's pride completely swells up. But guess what? The very next day, that brilliant apprentice was permanently cast out of the Silver Peak. Just gone. And why? Because his blinding brilliance made the elders feel incredibly small in their own light. It perfectly highlights this massive clash between two approaches to power. On one side, you have raw fire. It's eager, it's blinding, and it's ultimately self-destructive because it just triggers the insecurities of whoever is in charge. On the other side, you have Alaric's approach, the unseen ideology. This is where the master acts more like the moon, reflecting a greater source rather than blasting everyone with their own blinding light.
This brings us to a crucial point, what Alaric called the lesson of the masked sun. He actually wrote this down in his ledger. Never let your light blind the one who holds the torch. Right? Because in the court of dark sorcery, revealing the full extent of your brilliance way too early is essentially acting as a giant lightning rod for your master's insecurity. If you outshine the person holding your leash, you're practically inviting an accidental curse or a really swift trip to the gallows. It's deadly. You absolutely have to use strategic humility. Just like the moon doesn't have any actual light of its own, but it still commands the massive tides of the ocean, the true strategist never, ever eclipses the throne.
So let's pull this out of the myth for a second and look at how this helps you survive a fragile corporate hierarchy today. I mean, ask yourself, do you present your amazing breakthrough idea directly to the board, soaking up all that blinding light for yourself? Or do you strategically let your insecure manager take the credit, knowing that keeping them comfortable is what keeps you safe? It's a harsh reality, I know, but power is kind of like a ghost that flees when you chase it too loudly. Sometimes playing the moon is literally the only way to survive.
All right, turning the page to our second reflection, the vampire's invitation. Now, this act was sparked by an urgent summons to the king's council. But instead of just rushing to the palace to prove his worth like most people would, Alaric used what he called the law of the empty chair. So in month 1, he gets summoned. But through month 2, he just stays hidden up in his spire. He doesn't go. By month 3, the entire court is buzzing and whispering about his supposed genius. It's crazy. The more he was absent, the more the world was forced to basically build a massive monument to his importance, entirely in their own minds. When he finally showed up at the court, his mere silence was treated as profound wisdom, and his simplest words were suddenly absolute oracles. And this perfectly lays out the dark mechanics of the vampire's invitation. See, true power, according to Alaric, is a threshold that the victim has to willingly cross. Think of it like a mythic wraith or a vampire that literally cannot enter a home unbidden. The master of perception doesn't just force their way in. First, you craft this glamorous, enticing facade. Second, you completely withdraw your presence to create extreme scarcity, because let's face it, scarcity creates undeniable value. And third, you wait. You just let the victim unlatch the door themselves. They'll practically beg for your expertise, never even realizing they've completely orchestrated their own submission.
Let's ground this in reality again. Imagine you're negotiating a new role or maybe a major contract. Do you eagerly jump at the very first offer just to prove you're an amazing team player? Or do you strategically withdraw, creating that empty chair to force them to truly value your scarcity and expertise?
Because what the Obsidian Mirror is telling us here is pretty clear. If you are always available, you are never truly valued.
Okay, now we are plunging into our third and final and probably darkest reflection, the necromancer's puppet. So, this lesson was forged when this massive plague of shadows threatened the whole valley. Now, Alaric, being the master strategist, did not go down there to fight it himself. No way. Instead, he uses this brutal little thing called the cat's paw tactic. He just casually whispers the method to destroy the plague to a rival sorcerer. And of course, the rival eagerly takes the bait. He goes out, does all the grueling work, completely exhausts his mana reserves, and even taints his own reputation with the dark energy required to do it. Meanwhile, Alaric, he completely avoids the conflict. He just stays back, keeps his robes as clean and white as bone, and only steps in at the very end to offer a nice ceremonial final blessing. He literally used his rival to pull the chestnuts out of the fire while keeping his own skin completely unburnt.
Which totally cements this chilling analogy of the necromancer's puppet. The idea is that a true sovereign moves through the world like a puppeteer in a gallery of ghosts. You're making sure that while the hands of others are getting stained with the blood and exhaustion of the actual work, your own reputation stays as silent and spotless as the grave. It's the ultimate masterclass in indirect conflict resolution. You're neutralizing a huge threat without ever actually engaging it directly yourself.
And the crazy thing is, Alaric applied this indirect mastery to direct face-to-face threats as well. Later in the parable, this great conqueror marches straight up to the Silver Peak, demanding a full surrender. Normally, the expected defense here would be, walls of stone or blasts of raw fire, but Alaric used the fluid fortress. He greeted this conqueror wearing the guy's own colors. He spoke his exact dialect. He praised the conqueror's ancestors. By perfectly mirroring the enemy like this, Alaric removed literally all the friction. There was nothing left for the conqueror to strike against. By the time the sun went down, the conqueror actually believed he had found a twin soul and was sharing his deepest, darkest secrets. Alaric completely won a brutal war without casting a single offensive hex. So, think about your own battles for a second. When you're faced with a highly toxic rival or just an incredibly aggressive competitor at work, do you clash directly with them? Do you throw up defensive walls of stone and just exhaust your own energy? Or do you have the discipline to be a fluid fortress? Can you mirror their energy to remove that friction? Or maybe use a third party, a cat's paw, to neutralize the threat entirely while you just remain perfectly composed? All of this brings us to the very end of Alaric's ancient ledgers. The wizard's conclusion, navigating the storm. Ultimately, what the Obsidian Mirror teaches us is that the mind is the true fortress, and the physical body is really just its sentinel. Power isn't some static throne you just sit on forever. It is a highly fluid, constant dance of perception. The world is just a game of shadows, and the person who masters the light and the darkness that light creates is the one who rules the court. See, Alaric didn't close his books because he finally found peace. He closed them because he finally figured out how to navigate a massive storm without getting a single drop of water on him. So I really want you to reflect on these darker analogies. Are strategies like the masked sun and the cat's paw just a necessary shield you need to survive an incredibly toxic corporate storm? Or are they a predatory weapon used purely for mastering the chessboard and dominating others? That right there is the true reflection of the Obsidian Mirror. It totally forces you to look at the hidden mechanics of human nature. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. Between the King's Shadow, the Vampire's Invitation, and the Necromancer's Puppet, which of these strategic laws do you think is the absolutely most dangerous to ignore in your own professional life? Think carefully before you answer that, because whether you choose to actively play this game of shadows or not, you are already on the chessboard.